Chapter 10. Inverness. I read the comments, all of them, all 102. The article clutched in between my hands and illuminating my face from my phone. On the ride to the airport, on the plane, the words slicing and shredding the small amount of confidence I had mustered in over several months we had grown together. Those words, along with the accusations hurled at me from my own daughter, pinging through my head like a ball in a pinball machine. Who even is this? Is this that same woman? Gross. Who would even want to bang that old slut? Wait, I thought he dumped this bitch. She's the reason August Moon broke up, bitch. Foul. Honestly, fucking foul. I cried. More than once reading them. Not an earth-shattering sobbing of sorts, but a tear or two of utter disappointment. That for as much as we had changed, it seemed that the world had not. At the failure of Hayes and my own failure as a mother. I feared for our relationship, much as I had years ago, perhaps even more so now. That she would not talk to me, that she would hate me in a similar fashion and grow cold and isolated and vengeful. And so I was supremely surprised to find her sitting at my rosewood table when I arrived home less than 48 hours after our torrent of text. I had missed calls from Lily, Siobhan, Daniel, and Hayes. I ignored them all. My one priority was her. She sat there at the dining room table, backgrounded, curved in as if to protect herself, facing the Santa Catalina Mountains, the rain slightly blurring the mountain in the distance. The weather for once acclimating to my own dour mood. Her long hair in a plait down her back. A smattering of tissues littered the table, alone with the exception of her mug of chocolate and a small red box. It struck me, the light over her soft features, the melancholy set of her shoulders, the steam rising lazily from the cup that she looked like the subject, an automat by Hopper. Tired, solitary, desolate, her only company, her mug, and the red box. "Hi," I said to break the silence, my voice seeming to boom out in the hushed atmosphere of the home, jarring, startling. I took several cautious steps toward her, leaving my suitcase in the entryway. She flinched and turned around, her tired eyes meeting mine, and then at once she began to cry. She unfolded from her place at the table and made several quick strides to me, hurling herself into my arms, surprising me further. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking in that one word, her thin arms wrapping around my shoulders and neck, hugging herself to me. I said, feeling my own arms wrap around her petite waist and feeling not for the first time how like me she was. This child of mine, precious and unique and mine. I would do anything for her. This blood of my blood. And with that in mind, I said what I had prepared on the long flight over, committing to it, though I knew the choice would break my heart all the same. I said again, my heart pounding in my chest along with hers, so close they seemed to beat in time together. If you want me to leave him, it is done. I won't do that to you again. Nothing is worth losing you. Nothing in this world. I won't do it. She clutched me fiercely, pulling me tighter at the conclusion of my sentence, and then pulled back, her hands coming from around my shoulders to grasp my face. "I am still very angry with you, Mom," she said, her thumbs under my earlobes the way she caressed my face, making me feel like the child and she the adult, wiping away some of the rain from where it rolled off my hair. She searched my eyes, looking for something, it seemed, some clue about the sincerity of my promise. She paused for what seemed an eternity and said finally, "You promise?" I gulped, feeling my throat burn and my chest ache. I would do this for her. "Yes, I won't lose you again." She nodded, coming to her internal conclusion. "Will you tell me everything?" "I will tell you everything." "Then no." she whispered, her hands falling from my face and reaching to grab mine. No, Mom, I don't want you to leave him. The relief that flooded me nearly choked me. I pressed a palm to my chest as if to staunch the wave of ease that threatened to overwhelm me, her hands still intertwined with mine. You promise? She asked, her brown brow rising in confirmation. I led her to the rosewood table and I told her everything. So will you forgive him? Isabel asked, her fingers continuously circling the edge of her braid. My thumb stroked the handle of the white mug, the ring flashing up at me even in the dim California evening. She listened faithfully to my confession, beginning with our accidental run-in and the ending with a negative press leak after the gallery opening. She only spoke occasionally, absorbing the story and interjecting very little, and listening intently. It was healing for me to confess this to her, and a development in the relationship between the two of us. It seemed that we no longer were bound by the dichotomy of mother and child. Not only were we connected in parental sense, we were now two adults who loved each other and ultimately had the best interest of the other at the forefront. It was freeing, this new layer to my daughter, and one I wished I had recognized in her before now, before it was almost too late. I lifted one shoulder, non-committal. It seemed that perhaps I should be able to forgive him for this indiscretion. I understood why he did it, but it hurt me nonetheless. It was one of those rare instances where I felt the decades of life between us, the lack of emotional awareness to consider the other, only lacking because it had yet to grow. He was an incredible and accomplished man, but there was no substitute for the teacher that is time. Did I want that? For myself? At this age? To wait for him to ripen in this specific way? And yet, I could not help but think that the aftermath of his discretion was handled eloquently and maturely. It was me who was not in an emotional place to accept his apology. You love him, Mom. You have always loved him. Do you want to live any longer without that? She asked. I started to open my mouth to answer, and she held up one finger to halt me. And I get it. You were waiting to know what exactly you two were before you told me, but you were honestly saying you didn't know before the last few weeks? Come on, Mom, she said, letting the rest of her comment fade. I started to protest, to argue with her that I was not sure and did not know, and stopped almost immediately. She was right. I thought I was waiting for him to show me, to feel confident that he was choosing me and that this was something real, tangible, as permanent as can be given the nature of life itself. But he had shown me, over and over again. His vulnerability in Edinburgh, the way he pushed me to tell Isabel and Ibiza, his revelation about Annie and the darkness of his downfall. It was me who expressed my love first. I was a fool twice over, for thinking that I could wait to tell her and for not being sure of him to begin with. He had put his heart on the line before it was even up for discussion. It was time for me to do the same. I told him I loved him in London. I whispered, realizing my own contempt in this moment, that I had decided what felt like eons ago and only had the fortitude to speak it aloud now. She reached for the box on the other side of the table, sliding the deep red velvet container so it landed directly in front of me, forgotten in my tumultuous retelling of the past several months. There was a small cream envelope placed on the top of it with my name in a familiar print. Well, I think he loves you back, she said with a wink, unfolding gracefully from the chair and taking our 2 mugs to the island to give me a moment of privacy to open the gift. I reached cautiously for the envelope, a slight tremor in my hand. It read, I wanted to be home for you because I couldn't be. Happy birthday, my love. I hope to be with you every moment of forever and know this will help you keep track. Yours, H. His novel endearment made me smile. We had never been one for pet names, but my love felt timeless and sophisticated. A note from my gentleman caller. Though it was only 2 days until my birthday, I opened the box. Nestled in the voluptuous white padding of the case was the most beautiful watch I had ever seen. The gold-rimmed face was small and asymmetrical, seeming to melt off the dark green alligator leather band. No numbers dotted the mother-of-pearl background. Instead, the minuscule black hands rotated past light blue elliptical lines that curved in the same manner as the exterior. The piece could be worn alone or in tandem. It was gorgeous. It was art. And it was for me. I texted him, unsure of what time it was in whatever corner of the world he was currently in, or even what precisely to say. It is beautiful. I love it. Almost instantly came a reply. Good. Daniel, I said, trailing off. He stood there halfway out of the black M3. He had come to take Isabel back home for one more night before her return to school. She was inside packing her things, and yet I felt I was the one with the baggage. He held up a hand to silence me, the muscle in his jaw feathering slightly. He was angry, that much was clear, but controlled. I'm not mad about Hayes. As if he were very carefully measuring his words. How different he was than when we were married. Gone was the yell, first apologize later attitude that had aided in our separation. I raised a brow, finding that statement difficult to believe. A corner of his mouth lifted slightly, a ghost of amusement. Honestly, Soul, Ava is quite a bit younger than me. My opposition in your relationship would be hypocritical at least. Give me some credit, he said, shrugging slightly and coming around to the front of the car, his hands in his pockets, sunglasses perched on his head. He shook his head, looking at me with a mixture of sincerity and a hint of disappointment. I'm upset that you lied to her, which I know I don't have any room to talk on that matter given my own record. But she's older now, and you didn't even give her a chance to show you that she could be okay with it, that she could handle it, that she would be happy to know that you're happy, he said, pursing his lips. I was stunned. Who was this person? What happened to my curt, unfeeling, self-righteous ex-husband who abhorred the idea of me dating a younger man? He waited for me to reply. Patient, he wasn't wrong, and that stung. You're right, I should have told her, I said finally, still reeling from his overall demeanor and acceptance. That his only objection to my current situation was the fact that I didn't tell our daughter in a timely manner, and not that I was dating someone 19 years my junior for the second time. Thank you, I said, after several beats of uncomfortable silence. For what exactly, I wasn't sure. His acceptance, perhaps? The recognition of his own past failures and his previous duplicitousness. Both of us dating younger people, and both of us happy. He let a small smile show without replying, though that was answer enough. The door opened, indicating that Isabel had finished her packing and effectively ending our conversation. She seemed older even than yesterday, her bags thrown over her shoulder, headed back to Monterey tomorrow and on to another adventure. She gave me a warm embrace, kissing my cheek, her cool lips comforting and sweet, and with that kiss healing even more of our relationship. She released me and then paused before turning to the waiting car. The three of us stood there for a moment that was so brief I might have missed the feeling. Like the moment between songs, the transient space where one harmony fades and another has yet to begin. There was a change for us, a change for good. My birthday came and went, blissfully uneventful. The article was taken down shortly after I arrived home. The wonders of a good publicist. No trace at all that he had ever been there. It seemed that there would be no shaming from the public, and that the news of August Moon, most captivating band member, would disappear into oblivion, forgotten in the social media cycle. Isabel had been told by one or two friends, but she denied the story. When there was no evidence to discredit her claim, they moved on, caught up in more important matters: prom, Instagram likes, Taylor Swift, and so on. It seemed not even Lilith had been made aware, or if she was, she decided it was unimportant, that it did not matter moving forward, and there was no consequence. We had not spoken, Hayes and I. He called and left a message for my birthday, and I left it unanswered, unsure of not only what to say, but how to say it. It was liberating, the new sensation, that relatively speaking, the worst had happened, and the aftermath was completely different than it had been 5 years ago. No graffiti at the gallery, no photographers, no suspicious packages, as if we were finally free to simply exist in the world without the commentary of rabid strangers and keyboard warriors. And it was with that in mind that I dialed my assistant. "Siobhan," I said, "I need you to find some information for me." It was a winding cobblestone pathway, long and hidden. I almost missed it, the tires of the car skidding on the paved road several feet past the covered entrance. To many, it would have seemed to belong to no one, simply a dirt road that quickly disappeared into the cavernous wall of evergreens, made by nature and not man. However, if one were to continue to drive, the dirt would give way to stone and high walls, an imposing sign indicating that this was a private drive located at the beginning of the lane, threatening those who dared ignore it. As I bumped gently along the driveway, my hands clutched on the wheel, my excitement escalated. I checked my watch, feeling my heart swell with each tick of the dainty hand. I loved him. I chose him, and flew across the world to show him that he was mine. It had been no issue to find his address thanks to Siobhan. She knew a friend who knew a friend whose cousin had connections in Scotland, the small town that is LA, and within a matter of days I made it to that rainy country. I had wanted to keep it a secret, to surprise him like he had surprised me, to show him that I had made my choice. When the drive finally gave way to the front yard, my breath froze in my chest. It was one of those most beautiful homes I had ever seen. The sandstone exterior coated with ivy along the left-hand window, contrasting beautifully with the dark oak door. The slate roof rising and pitching in neat lines reminiscent of a castle. The rounded bay windows on either side, symmetrical and historic, lending the home an almost cozy feeling. There was a small cottage located adjacent to the home, though far enough that it was private and sequestered. And by small, it was nearly the size of my own home in the Palisades. I drove cautiously by, anticipating that at any moment I would be halted by security. The door did open, startling me. Adam's familiar head poked through. "Thought that was you," he said, voice gruff, as he rolled down the window to offer him a shy wave. "You did?" "Yeah, I saw you on the camera from the front. Does he know you're here yet? I can buzz him for you," he said, leaning away from the door as if to grab a phone. "No!" I exclaimed, reaching out the window to stop him. He paused abruptly. A sliver of guilt worked its way inside me. That he had assumed I'd already made Hayes aware of my impending arrival, and that he might possibly get in trouble for disobeying orders. No, I said more calmly. "I'd like to let him know myself." "Any particular place I should park?" "Nope. Go right ahead. If you leave it in the circle, I'll grab your bags and park it in the garage later." I offered my thanks and continued my drive, the hedges and landscaping in the center of the semicircle pebbled way blurring past. I pulled to a stop, feeling suddenly unbearably nervous, my stomach roiling and my breath shaking as I made my way up the several wide stairs to the door. This was Hayes, my Hayes, and there was no need to be nervous. I went to use the brushed gold knocker to announce my arrival, and before I could remove the heavy metal to strike it, the door opened. I looked at eye level, confused, when it seemed at first that no one was there, and the door had opened of its own accord. And then I looked down into the blue-green eyes that were achingly familiar, transposed on a child's face. At first, I could not comprehend it, my mind stalling at what was so apparent, processing at such a sluggish pace that everything else faded away, with the exception of this beautiful girl. She was a toddler, perhaps not even 2, dressed in a navy jumper dress and sweater, her deep auburn hair piled into the sloppiest half-done bun I had ever seen in my life. "Hello," she said, her accent and voice painfully similar to my favorite sound. "Kate," came Hayes' playful shout from somewhere in the distance, a pleading tone to his voice. "You can't just leave when I'm in the middle of brushing your hair," he said, laughing and calling to her. She and I stood there, staring at each other, both shocked, senseless, both trying to decipher who the other was. My stomach somewhere back in the SUV, and my body beginning to vibrate with 1,000 different emotions. She released the low knob and reached one small hand out for me, as if for me to hold her, to touch her. I could not bear to. I knew in that moment I could not touch her. To touch her, to take her small hand, would be to know viscerally that she was real. And if I did that, I would snap. "Kate," he said again, his voice slightly muffled and much closer. He entered my line of vision from the long hallway that led to a living room area beyond, comb in hand and a hair elastic clutched between his teeth. His mouth opened in shock, the ponytail holder falling to the hardwood floor with a barely audible noise. "Solène," he breathed, unmoving. "Daddy, who?" she said, leaving the door and padding rapidly to Hayes, catching on to my more than odd behavior and retreating to him. "Daddy?" I asked, my voice coming out with a tremor. "Daddy?" I said, louder this time, feeling my throat and my chest burning with betrayal and hurt and shock. Kate made it to him and clutched the navy pant leg just under his knee, clearly startled by my outburst. He looked down at her and said, "Go find Nan, love. She's in the playroom upstairs." Immediately, she began to protest, and he knelt down, smoothing her hair back and turning her into the direction of the stairway just out of sight. "Go on, I'll watch. Use the handrail the whole way up," he instructed, pointing up to the wood trim and giving her a gentle nudge. He watched her, and I watched him, anger burning and boiling like an inferno now that the innocent child was gone. He made his way to me slowly, and with each step, my fury grew. It grew, and I felt my fingers twitch. I had never in my life resorted to physical violence, but I was tempted to mark him with my fingers, to unleash this hurt with a physical manifestation and place it on him. "I didn't know you were coming," he said, when he was just within striking distance. Wise man. I said nothing, had no response to his excuse. "Sol, I was going to tell you," he said, reaching for my hand, the one with the watch. I stepped back out of the doorway, feeling the mist begin to collect on my hair. "All men say that." He sighed as if all the weight of the world rested on him. He retreated slightly and opened the drawer of the table in the foyer. He fished around inside it and withdrew a thick envelope. "This was returned to me a few days ago. I mailed it just after I sent your watch, but it didn't make it to you," he said, offering it to me fully, his fingers on the furthest edge of the paper to maintain his distance, as if he could sense the suppressed violence within me and wanted to refrain from increasing it further. The envelope had my address and name on the front, but the writing had blurred with moisture so that the last third of the print was obscured. It was marked "Return to Sender" nearly a week prior. "I'm sorry," he said softly, as I continued to stare at the letter, still uncomprehending at what I had just discovered. "There's a guest house in the rear of the property. I'll have Adam escort you there. Read it, stay, and read it." He pleaded, not touching me, but his words caressing me all the same. "It explains everything. I won't come to you, but I will wait for you," he said, his eyes boring into mine, the blue gaze so hot it seemed to burn with sincerity, like the inside of a flame. I stood there unmoving, unsure, and unable to speak at all. "So, please," he said, seeming to beg. He took one small step toward me, and with that I snapped out of my trance. I jerked back, the heel of my shoe nearly catching on the first step. I threw up my hands to prevent his advance. "Okay," I said, thinking only of the privacy I suddenly needed. There was no way I could survive a plane ride back to LA after this revelation. I needed to be alone desperately to process what could only be described as the shock of a lifetime. Solène, I hope that you enjoyed the watch and that you had a lovely birthday. I feel that it's only right to tell you that it was purchased well in advance of Paris and the media explosion. I hate that now it may seem like a desperate ploy to get you back. I would resort to such measures and more to do so, mind you, but want to assure you that it was bought with only the intention of celebrating you and showing you how I feel. I haven't told you I loved you yet. I know you recognize this. I can't tell you how it felt to hear you say that in London. It made me feel like a man made whole again. To be loved by a woman like you not once, but twice is rare, and I needed to hear those 3 words more than you could ever know. I haven't told you I loved you, as I have not told you everything. Unfathomable, I know. As if your former pop star boyfriend having a deceased lover wasn't unthinkable enough. I want you to understand first why I haven't told you. You were waiting to tell Isabel about me until you were completely sure what it was developing between the 2 of us. That you could have certainty regarding my intentions for us, and moreover certainty for your daughter. There's one thing that I have never been more sure of, and that is my feelings for you. I too was waiting for you to decide that this was real and that this was more than just lunch. That you were in love not only with the idea of me, but with the reality of me. After you left Paris, I began to fear that I had waited too long, had played the hand wrong, and assumed that the press leak, as small as it was, would not impact us. That you would understand why I didn't burden you with it, as these things happen frequently, and thanks to my team, they are inconsequential as a result. No sense in disrupting our pleasurable vacation for something that would dissipate in a matter of days, which by now no doubt you have sensed already. The media and the press have moved on, forgotten the issue entirely, on to some other irrelevant, trivial incident between some other, more public star. Regardless of that, I am sorry for not telling you. I was waiting for you to decide. To love you is one thing, to trust you completely is something different altogether. And it is with that in mind that I reveal to you my final and most well-kept secret. I know that you needed certainty to tell your daughter about me, and I required the same from you. I have a daughter. Her name is Kate. She is just under 2 years old, 18 months as of last week. She was born 2 months before Annie died. This has been extraordinarily difficult for me to keep from you. I loathed lying to you, but I could not tell you about her until you were sure that you wanted me and that I could trust you. Annie was a remarkable woman, and I loved her fully, in a completely unique and wonderful way. And the 2 months that the 3 of us shared together were magical and far too brief. I miss her every day and rejoice that at least I have some part of her with me still. Kate is everything to me. I would stop the world from turning for her and can acutely understand your feelings for Isabel. The need to protect her from the world, including myself and my fame, is far greater than any other instinct I have ever experienced. She is lovely and thoughtful and playful, and should you deem me worthy of your love still after reading this, I would want you to meet her. I know that if you can forgive me for this last indiscretion, you would love her too. I need you to know, Solène. I need you to be sure that you want me. I won't tell Kate about you until you have made your choice. I know this feeling. You will understand. My heart has been yours. You hold it completely and indefinitely. I love you. Please forgive me, Hayes. I read it at least a dozen times, and each time a new wave of emotions crashed through me. I paced back and forth in the cottage, reading and ruminating. The first time I read it, I could barely see the words through my haze of bitterness and betrayal, that he did not trust me outright with this, and that he had lied to my face every day for months, that he could do it so easily, and that on the surface it seemed to cost him very little. He had used me, and I had let him. The fourth time I read it, I felt a sense of foreshadowing. I replayed all those little moments we shared, his comments in Edinburgh, someone who gave him a special gift. I foolishly thought it was me and my love. I know now that the gift was a child. Or his statement regarding Isabel and knowing how difficult it could be to stay away from her. The many conversations with his mum, his half-truths and veiled lies, that he was likely talking to or about Kate to her was obvious to me now. The 10th time I read it, I felt almost nothing, my body and mind numb to this realization. I stood at the door when I finished it that time, bag and tow, convinced that I would never feel love for him again, and that I had well and truly been emotionally stunned, that while I would always love him, I could no longer be in love with him. I stood there at the door looking through the rainy window, seeing him walk with Kate on his shoulders, both in green wellies and waxed jackets, headed from the front door through the manicured interior garden to the entrance of a walking path, the one he told me he used to take often, with her. I could see the two of them clearly, like an epiphany, that if I left, this would be his life, likely forever. That he would not love again was obvious to me, and he had nearly said so himself. He would take one final chance, and if I made my choice, then that would be it. It would be him and Kate and this home until she grew up and left him, and he would be left alone. The 12th time I read it, my heart cracked. Shattering for the last time, I remember the days of postpartum myself. The sleeplessness, the wonder, the pain, the change in my body and in my heart, the new light that I saw Daniel in, more dependent on him than I realized, the love that was contained in our baby, the biological, innate, and irrevocable shift in who I was at my core. The idea that Hayes had experienced that with someone else was uncomfortable, but the idea of him experiencing that alone, without anyone by his side, unconscionable. And I realized that as much as I hated him for this, for lying to me and keeping her from me, I was in no place to judge. Had I really handled Isabel any differently? Would I have told Hayes about her if when we met she was just a toddler? I pictured Isabel as she was then, innocent, pure, impressionable as children are. My own aching vulnerability when she was that young, my desire to protect her from anyone who didn't love her as fiercely as I did, was pure impulse. Could I blame him when deep in my bones I would have done the same? 2 days passed during my rereads. I barely slept or ate. I was nothing but thoughts circling and cycling constantly. I thought of Isabel. I thought of the question she posed to me. Did I want to live any longer without love? Without him? I emerged from the guest house, and I made a choice.